The colony was silent except for the wind that whistled through broken metal and empty streets. Once it had been full of life, markets busy with voices, children running, ships coming and going. Now only shadows remained, and among those shadows sat a small alien girl. Her body was thin, her clothes torn, her face dirty with dust and old tears. She hugged her knees to her chest and rocked back and forth, whispering words to herself like a secret no one cared to hear. She said she had never known a birthday, never once been given even a piece of bread with her name on it. She didn't know the day she was born. No one had told her. Every year passed like a blur, and she only grew older without anyone noticing. Her stomach growled with hunger, but hunger was nothing new. She had lived with it for as long as she could remember. What hurt her most was the silence inside her heart. Every time she saw lights in far-off houses, every time she heard laughter from families that still survived, she wondered what it would feel like to have someone smile at her, to tell her she mattered. But she had been abandoned long ago, left behind after war took her parents. People in the colony walked past her as if she was invisible. Sometimes cruel voices called her worthless. Sometimes hands pushed her away from scraps she tried to eat. She had learned not to expect anything good. Yet that night, as she whispered about her missing birthdays, someone heard her. A human trader walked down the ruined street, his boots heavy against the ground. He was carrying a bag of supplies, heading back to his camp. He had seen many abandoned souls before, and he had taught himself to look away. Getting involved meant danger, meant responsibility, meant risk. But that night, something made him stop. The sound of soft crying reached his ears, not loud, but sharp enough to touch his chest. He turned and saw the girl's glowing eyes in the dark, wet with tears. For a moment, he thought of walking away. His world was already hard, and he had no time for strangers. But her voice, broken and trembling, cut into him. She said, "I never had a birthday." Just 6 words, but they refused to leave his mind. He stood there for a long time, watching her. She looked small, fragile, like the wind could blow her away. When she noticed him, she stiffened and tried to hide her face. She thought he would beat her or chase her like others had, but the human did nothing. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of bread, not much, but fresh enough to smell good. He held it out without speaking. The girl stared at it, then at him, then back at the bread. Her hands trembled as she took it, as if it was a trap. She ate quickly, her eyes darting around like someone would snatch it away. He said nothing, just watched. And for the first time in a long while, she felt safe enough to swallow without fear. When the bread was gone, she whispered thank you, her voice so soft he almost didn't hear. He asked her name, but she shook her head. She said she didn't have one anyone used. People only called her child or worse. He didn't push her. Instead, he crouched down so his eyes were level with hers and asked why she was crying. At first, she said nothing. Then her lips moved again. And she repeated the same words, "I never had a birthday." Her voice cracked on the word birthday as if it carried a weight far heavier than food or shelter. The human felt a strange pull in his chest, an ache he couldn't ignore. He remembered his own childhood, remembered candles, remembered people cheering his name. He had taken those memories for granted. This girl had none. The night deepened, stars faint in the poisoned sky, and the human knew he should leave. But he didn't. Something in the way she looked at him, half afraid, half desperate, chained his feet. He offered her a place by his campfire. At first she refused, shaking her head hard, whispering that if she followed him, she would bring him trouble. But he simply waited, holding out his hand. After long silence, she stood, her bare feet scraping against the ground, and walked with him. She followed like a shadow, always a step behind, ready to run if he turned on her. At the campfire, he gave her more food, and she ate in silence. He noticed scars on her arms, marks of people who had hurt her before. He didn't ask about them. She didn't want pity, only warmth. The firelight flickered on her face, and for the first time, her lips curved into the smallest hint of a smile. She said nothing more about birthdays, but her eyes told him she carried that pain like a heavy stone. As he watched her curl near the fire, her head resting on her knees, he felt something inside him shift. He had promised himself never to get involved, never to take responsibility for anyone else in this cruel galaxy. But now, staring at this abandoned girl, he knew he could not simply walk away. She belonged nowhere. But in that moment, she belonged with him. And though he didn't say it out loud, a thought formed in his heart. Maybe, just maybe, he could give her the one thing she had never known. A day that was only hers. A birthday. The morning sun rose weakly over the ruined colony, its light pale against the broken buildings and scattered rubble. The human trader woke to the sound of movement near his fire. He sat up quickly, ready to defend his supplies. But then he saw the small alien girl crouching by the edge of the flames. She was not stealing. She was only staring at the bread he had left near the fire, her hands twitching like she wanted to take it but feared punishment. When their eyes met, she froze. He simply nodded and pushed the bread toward her. She grabbed it and ate so fast it was clear she expected someone to snatch it away any moment. Watching her, the human felt both pity and anger, pity for her and anger for the world that had left her like this. She did not speak much that morning. Her eyes stayed low and her body was tense as if ready to flee at any sudden move. The human asked her simple questions, like if she wanted water or if she was cold. She answered with a nod or a shake of her head, but no more than that. He noticed her skin was marked with faded bruises and scars, and he understood without needing to ask that life had been cruel. He poured water into a tin cup and gave it to her. She held it carefully, as if afraid it might be taken back, then drank every drop. When she was done, she looked at him with confusion, almost like she could not understand why he had given her something without asking anything in return. The human packed his bag, ready to leave for the colony market. But when he stood up, he saw her eyes following him. She looked down quickly when she noticed he had caught her staring. He sighed and said he had to go, but she could come with him if she wanted. For a long moment, she did not move. Then, slowly, she stood and began to follow a few steps behind. She walked with her head lowered, her small frame blending into the ruins, but every time he looked back, she was still there. He said nothing, letting her choose her distance. As they walked through the ruined streets, the human noticed how the people reacted. Some glanced at him, some muttered under their breath. Others sneered when they saw the girl trailing behind him. He could tell from their faces that she was known here, not by name, but as another abandoned child not worth saving. The girl heard the whispers too. Her shoulders sank lower, and she pressed closer to the human, as if trying to hide behind him. He gave a sharp look at one of the men who laughed, and the laughter stopped, though the hate in the man's eyes did not. At the market, the human traded some of his goods. He noticed how the girl stood far away, never touching anything, never speaking, always watching with a mixture of fear and curiosity. He bought a few extra things, food, cloth, and a small tin cup just for her. When he handed it to her, she looked at him as if he had given her treasure. She held it against her chest like it was something priceless. The human felt his chest tighten. It was only a cup, but to her, it was the first thing she could truly call her own. That night, back at the campfire, she spoke a little more. Her voice was quiet, broken, but her words carried weight. She told him she had been left behind during the war, her parents gone. Some strangers had taken her for a while, but only to use her for chores, to beat her when she was too slow, to starve her when she made mistakes. She had run away and survived in the ruins since then. The human listened without interrupting. He wanted to ask more, but the way her hands trembled told him she had already said too much for one night. Instead, he only said, "You are safe now." She looked at him in disbelief, as if the words were too strange to understand, but she did not argue. She only curled up by the fire and closed her eyes, letting herself rest in the warmth. Days began to pass like this. The girl started to walk closer to him instead of far behind. She ate slower now, not like someone who feared her food would vanish, but like someone learning to trust it would not be stolen. Sometimes, he caught her watching him with wide eyes, as if trying to study his every move. She still spoke little, but sometimes a whisper of laughter escaped her when he joked or when something unexpected happened. It was small, but it was a beginning. Yet not everyone was blind to what was happening. In the dark corners of the colony, whispers spread. Some said the human had taken in an abandoned alien girl. Others mocked him, saying he was wasting food and time on someone worthless. But there were also those who saw value in her, not as a child, but as something to sell, to use, to control. The human did not know it yet, but eyes were watching them both. Jealous eyes, greedy eyes. The bond that was quietly forming between him and the girl was drawing attention, and in a place where kindness was rare, it was also dangerous. One evening, as they sat by the fire, the girl whispered again about her missing birthdays. She did not ask for anything. She only said the words as if speaking to the flames. The human felt the ache in his chest grow stronger. He had given her food, water, and a place to rest, but he realized what she wanted most was something different, something simple that no one had given her before, a reason to feel special, even for one day. He decided then that he would give it to her. He did not know how yet, but the thought burned in his mind. She looked at him and tilted her head, sensing he was hiding a secret. He smiled faintly and told her to rest. She curled near the fire again, but this time, before her eyes closed, she whispered something soft. It was the first time she had said it. She said, "Thank you, human." It was barely a breath, but he heard it, and it stayed with him long after she had fallen asleep. He stared into the fire and promised himself that her words about never having a birthday would not remain true for long. The human could not stop thinking about the girl's words. Every night, as the fire burned low and the girl slept curled close to its warmth, he remembered the way she had whispered that she never had a birthday. The sound of her voice, so empty and hopeless, stayed with him even when he tried to forget. He knew food and water were important, but something inside him told him that she needed more than that. She needed to know she was worth celebrating, even if only for one night. And so, a dangerous idea grew in his heart. He would give her the first birthday of her life. The next morning, he acted as if everything was normal. He gave her bread, filled her little tin cup with water, and told her he needed to go to the market again. She followed him as usual, walking just a step behind, her small feet leaving prints in the dust. She didn't ask questions, but he noticed the way her eyes searched his face, as if she could sense that something was different. He forced himself not to look back too often. If she knew what he was planning, it would ruin the surprise. At the market, the human traded his goods with unusual care. He bought the normal things, food, bandages, and a bit of cloth to make her a warmer blanket, but he also searched for something else. He walked past the stalls, ignoring the sneers of people who looked at the girl behind him. He was looking for candles. It was not easy. The colony was poor, and candles were rare. Finally, an old vendor pulled out a small box. Inside were 5 thin candles, dusty but still good. The human's eyes lit up. He asked the price, and the vendor laughed, naming something outrageous. The human clenched his jaw but paid anyway. To him, they were worth far more than the coins he carried. Next, he searched for something sweet. Children in the colony never tasted sugar, not anymore, not after the war. But somewhere in the back of the market, he found a smuggler selling scraps of old-world food. Among them, wrapped in metal foil, was a small, stale cake. It was not soft, not fresh, but when he touched it, he knew it would be enough. The smuggler demanded double the price, saying such things were rare. The human hesitated, thinking of the supplies he would lose, but then he remembered the girl's tears and handed over the payment. He could live with less food, but she could not live forever with no memory of joy. He hid the cake deep in his bag, covering it with cloth so she would not see. When he turned, he noticed her watching him closely. Her eyes narrowed, suspicious, as if she knew he had done something strange. He smiled at her, pretending it was nothing, but she didn't believe him fully. Still, she said nothing and kept walking quietly beside him. As they left the market, whispers followed them again. People muttered that the human was foolish, that he was wasting good trade on a useless alien child. He ignored them, but the girl heard every word. Her head lowered, and she clutched her tin cup tighter, ashamed. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder, and though she flinched at first, she did not pull away. She walked a little closer to him after that. Back at the campfire, he prepared their evening meal. He acted normal, talking about the things he had seen, but inside his heart was racing. He had to keep the surprise hidden until the right moment. The girl ate quietly, as she always did, her eyes fixed on the fire. Then she said softly, "People in the market laugh at me." Her voice cracked with shame. He looked at her for a long moment before answering. Let them laugh. They don't know your worth. She frowned, confused by his words, but his tone made her believe them, at least a little. For the first time, she looked directly into his eyes and did not look away. That night, after she had fallen asleep, the human sat awake with the small cake in his hands. He unwrapped the foil and checked the candles. He felt nervous, almost foolish, but then he imagined her face when she saw it. He whispered to himself, if she smiles just once, it will be worth it. He hid the cake again, careful not to let her notice in the morning. He knew the risk was not only in finding the cake, but also in what others might do if they learned he was keeping the girl close. Already, greedy eyes were watching. Already, rumors had begun to spread. Some people would not allow such kindness to exist without trying to destroy it. The next day, he worked harder to distract her from his plan. He took her farther from the ruins, showed her a river where the water was clean enough to drink. She stepped into the shallow water, her reflection trembling on the surface, and for the first time she laughed. The sound was small, almost hidden, but it broke the heavy silence between them. He memorized it, storing it away like treasure. When she slipped and almost fell, he caught her, and she looked up at him with wide eyes. For a moment, she seemed less like the abandoned child he had met, and more like a little girl discovering the world for the first time. He thought then that the birthday he was planning was not just a gift for her. It was a gift for himself, too, a reminder that there was still light in this broken place. But as they returned to the colony, he noticed figures watching them from the shadows. Men who smiled with greed, eyes sharp with hunger not for food, but for power. He felt a chill run through him. He tightened his grip on his bag, and his steps grew quicker. The girl noticed his unease and whispered, "Are we in danger?" He forced a smile and said, "Not as long as I am here." She seemed to believe him, though her small hand reached out and touched his sleeve, clinging like she feared he might vanish. That night, he sat by the fire again, the girl curled beside him. She whispered once more, "I never had a birthday." He looked at her, his decision firm now, stronger than ever. Soon she would have one. Soon she would know that someone cared enough to give her a day of her own. He only hoped that when the moment came, nothing would take it away from her. The night air in the colony was heavy with smoke and whispers. The human sat by the fire, pretending everything was calm, but he could not shake the feeling that eyes were following him. Every time he went to the market with the girl, he noticed stares. At first, he thought they were only curious, maybe mocking him for wasting food on an abandoned child. But the looks grew sharper, colder, filled with greed. He had lived long enough in the colony to know what it meant. Someone had started to take interest in the girl, and not in a kind way. The girl felt it too. That evening, she sat closer to him than before, her small body pressed against his side as if hiding in his shadow. Her wide eyes darted around at every sound, every laugh in the distance. She whispered, almost too softly to hear, "They know me." The human asked what she meant, but she shook her head, refusing to explain. He did not push her, but his heart grew heavier. He remembered the scars on her arms, the way she ate like she expected the food to be snatched from her hands. She had lived under cruelty before. Whoever had left those marks might still be searching for her. Or worse, they might already know where she was. Far across the colony, in a broken hall filled with smoke and stale air, a gang leader sat with his men. He was a tall alien with gray skin, eyes like blades, and a grin that never reached his eyes. Word had reached him that a human trader had taken in a girl. Not just any girl, but the one his men used to chase away, the one who had slipped through their grip when they wanted to sell her as property. He slammed his hand on the table, making the dishes rattle, and declared that the girl belonged to him. His men laughed cruelly, already dreaming of the coins they would make. To them, she was not a child, not a soul, just a thing to be bought and sold. Orders were given that night. The girl would be taken back no matter what. And if the human stood in their way, he would be crushed. The next day, the human noticed shadows trailing him as he traded in the market. The girl stayed close, clutching her tin cup tightly, but her hands trembled. He could feel her fear, though she tried not to show it. She whispered again, "I don't deserve this. I don't deserve food or fire or you." Her voice cracked, and she would not meet his eyes. He stopped walking, crouched down in front of her, and placed his hands gently on her thin shoulders. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "Everyone deserves kindness. Everyone deserves one day that belongs only to them. You are no different." She stared at him, confusion in her eyes, as if no one had ever spoken such words to her before. He held her gaze until she finally nodded, though doubt still lingered on her face. That night, as the fire burned low, the human worked in secret. He checked the small cake hidden in his bag, made sure the candles were still safe. Tomorrow, he thought. Tomorrow, she will have her first birthday. He glanced at the girl sleeping near the fire, her face calm for once, and he felt a strange warmth in his chest. But outside the glow of the flames, danger was moving. In the ruins beyond their camp, the gang leader's men crept closer, watching from the shadows. They saw the fire, saw the girl, saw the human standing guard. They whispered to each other, planning. Not tonight, they decided. Tomorrow, when the human was distracted, when his guard was down, they would strike. They would tear the gift of hope from her hands before she even had a chance to taste it. The human sensed something was wrong, even if he could not see them. His sleep was light, his ears sharp for every sound. At dawn, he woke and found the girl sitting up, hugging her knees, eyes wide. She said she had dreamed of being dragged away again, of chains and dark rooms. He placed his coat around her shoulders and told her dreams were only shadows, not truth. But deep down, he feared her dream was a warning. He knew the gang would not forgive kindness. In this broken colony, good things were always stolen away. Still, he refused to stop. He spent the day preparing. He gathered wood, found a flat stone for the cake, and cleared a space where the candles could shine. The girl watched him curiously, asking why he was working so hard. He only smiled and told her to wait and see. She frowned, suspicious but too shy to press further. For a moment, he let himself imagine it. The firelight, her face glowing with surprise, the small laugh that might escape her when she realized the celebration was for her. That vision gave him strength. No gang, no threat would take it away from her if he could help it. But the danger was closing in faster than he knew. In the alleys of the colony, the gang leader sharpened his blade and promised his men rewards for bringing the girl back. He spoke of the coins they would earn, the power they would gain. To him, the human was nothing but an obstacle, a fool who dared to give light to someone meant to live in darkness. His men cheered, their voices echoing in the empty hall, sealing the girl's fate. As the sun set, the human felt the weight of the night pressing down. He sat by the fire, the girl beside him, and listened to the silence around them. The ruins seemed too still, too quiet, like the air before a storm. The girl leaned closer, whispering, "Something bad is coming." He placed a hand on her head and said softly, "No matter what happens, I will not let them take this from you." She looked at him with wide eyes, and for the first time, she believed him. The flames flickered, the stars came out, and somewhere in the darkness, footsteps drew nearer. The human tightened his grip on the piece of broken wood he kept by his side. Tomorrow was meant to be her birthday, but tonight he would have to fight to make sure that promise stayed alive. The night was darker than usual, the stars hidden behind heavy clouds. The human sat by the fire with his bag close to him, his heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. Inside that bag was the little cake, the stale but precious treasure he had paid almost everything for. Tonight was the night. Tonight, the alien girl would finally have what she had never been given before, a birthday. He kept glancing at her as she sat across the fire, hugging her knees and staring into the flames. Her face was quiet, almost too quiet, like she was afraid to hope for anything. He forced a small smile and said, "Close your eyes for a moment." She tilted her head in confusion, but did as he asked. With careful hands, the human pulled out the cake, unwrapped it, and placed it on a flat stone he had cleaned earlier. He pushed the 5 thin candles into it, one by one, his fingers trembling with both excitement and fear. When he struck the match and lit the candles, the flames flickered like tiny stars in the darkness. The light danced, casting soft shadows on the broken walls around them. For a moment, even the ruined colony looked less empty, as if hope itself had lit the place. He stared at it, his chest tight, then whispered, "Okay, open your eyes." The girl opened them slowly. At first, she only saw the glow, and then her eyes widened as the small cake with its candles came into view. She froze, not moving, not breathing. Her lips parted as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. She looked at the cake, then at the human, then back at the cake again. Her hands began to tremble, and her eyes filled with tears. What is this?" she whispered. The human smiled gently and said, "It's yours. It's your birthday. Happy birthday." Her face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she shook her head in disbelief. "No, no, this can't be for me," she cried, her voice breaking. She touched the cake with trembling fingers, almost afraid it would vanish like a dream. The candles flickered against her wet eyes, and she whispered again, "I never had one. Never. Not once." The human reached over, steadying her hand, and said softly, "Then let this be your first." She covered her mouth with her hands, laughing and crying at the same time. It was the sound of a soul breaking free of chains, even if only for a moment. She leaned forward, staring at the small flames like they were the most beautiful things she had ever seen. "What do I do?" she asked, her voice trembling with wonder. The human chuckled, his own throat tight with emotion. "You close your eyes and make a wish. Then you blow out the candles." She nodded quickly, pressing her palms together, as if she didn't want to waste a second. Her eyes closed, her lips moved in a silent wish, and then she blew. The candles went out, smoke curling into the night air. She laughed again, a sound so pure it made the human forget the danger pressing around them. He cut the cake carefully and gave her the first piece. She took it in both hands, staring at it like it was priceless treasure. When she took a bite, her face lit up and tears streamed down her cheeks again. She chewed slowly, savoring every crumb, whispering, "Sweet, it's sweet." For the first time in her life, she tasted something made to bring joy, not just to survive. She giggled between tears, and the human felt a weight lift from his heart. He had given her something no one else ever had. She would never again be able to say she had no birthday. But joy was fragile in a world like theirs. Just as she reached for another piece, a sharp sound cut through the night, the crunch of boots on stone, the low murmur of voices. The human's head snapped up, his hand instinctively reaching for the piece of wood he kept beside him. The girl froze, her smile fading instantly into fear. She recognized the sound. Her small body shook as she whispered, "They've come." The human's chest tightened. He had known danger would find them, but he had hoped, just for tonight, it would stay away. From the shadows, figures emerged, rough, armed, eyes burning with greed. The gang had arrived. Their leader stepped forward, tall and cruel, his gray skin catching the firelight. His smile was sharp as he looked at the girl and then at the cake. "Well, isn't this sweet?" he mocked, his voice like a blade. "A human wasting food and candles on trash." His men laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the fragile moment. The girl pressed against the human's side, clutching his sleeve, her face buried in his arm. She was trembling, whispering, "Don't let them take me. Please." The human stood, placing himself between her and the gang. His voice was calm but hard. "She's not yours. She's not trash. Leave us." The leader's smile widened, his sharp teeth showing. "Everything here is mine if I want it. That girl ran from me once. Now she belongs to me again." He gestured to his men, and they began to spread out, surrounding the campfire. The candles on the cake still smoked, the small glow of the moment already fading under the weight of danger. The girl clung tighter, whispering frantically, "You can't fight them. They're too many. They'll kill you." Her tears dripped onto his arm, but he did not move. His grip on the wood tightened, his body steady. He looked down at her and whispered, "Everyone deserves a birthday. I won't let them take yours away." She looked up at him then, her eyes wide with shock and something else, hope. The gang laughed louder, mocking his words, but the human did not back away. He stepped forward, ready to fight even if it meant his death. Behind him, the girl's eyes stayed locked on the small cake, the candles now gone dark. She had tasted joy for the first time, and she understood what he was risking to protect it. Fear shook her body, but her heart filled with something new. For the first time, she believed she was worth fighting for. The fire crackled low as the gang surrounded them. The human stood tall, his broken piece of wood gripped tightly in his hand. Against blades, against numbers, it looked useless, but he did not move back. The girl clung to his arm, trembling so hard her teeth chattered. She whispered, "Please, don't fight them. They'll kill you. I'm not worth it." He looked down at her, his jaw tight, and answered softly, "You are worth it. Everyone deserves someone to fight for them. His voice was calm, but his heart pounded like a drum. He knew he might not survive the night, but he could not give her up. The gang leader laughed, his voice cruel and sharp. Listen to the fool, fighting over garbage. His men jeered, stepping closer, their eyes greedy as they stared at the girl. The leader drew a blade that shimmered faintly in the firelight. Move aside, human, or we'll cut you down and take what's ours. The human took one step forward instead, placing himself firmly between them and the girl. She's not yours, he said again, his voice steady. The laughter turned into snarls. One of the gang members lunged first, swinging a rusted pipe at the human. The human blocked it with his wood, the force jarring his arms, but he did not let go. He shoved the attacker back with a sudden strike, surprising them with his strength. Another rushed in, and the human swung hard, hitting the man across the face. Blood sprayed, and the gang fell silent for a heartbeat. They had not expected him to resist so fiercely. The girl gasped, watching with wide eyes. She wanted to scream for him to stop, but at the same time, something inside her swelled. No one had ever stood for her like this. No one had ever risked their life just to keep her safe. Her tears spilled, but they were no longer only of fear. They were mixed with something new, something powerful. The gang regained their courage and charged all at once. The human fought like a man with nothing to lose. He swung, blocked, shoved, and punched, his body moving with pure willpower. The piece of wood cracked under the strain, but still he used it, striking until his knuckles bled. Blades slashed his arms and back, pain burning through him, but he gritted his teeth and refused to fall. Every time he stumbled, he looked back at the girl, and her frightened eyes gave him strength to rise again. She cried out when one of the men slashed his shoulder, blood spilling down his arm. "Stop! Please stop!" she screamed, but he only shouted back, "Run if you can! Don't let them take you!" But she did not run. Her small body refused to move, her hands clutching her tin cup so tightly that her fingers turned white. She could not leave him, not after everything he had done for her. The leader finally stepped forward, tired of watching his men struggle. He raised his blade and charged. The human met him head-on, blocking the strike with what was left of his wood. The blade sliced deep into his side, and he groaned in pain but didn't fall. With the last of his strength, he rammed his shoulder into the leader's chest, knocking him back. The men shouted in shock as their leader stumbled. The human raised his broken wood like a spear and slammed it down, inches from the leader's face. The others froze, unsure if he would kill their master. The girl screamed his name, her voice full of desperation. Her tiny hands grabbed his arm, pulling him back, begging him not to die. He looked down at her, his vision blurring from pain and blood loss, but he saw her face clearly. Her tears, her fear, her hope. It was all for him. That was enough to steady him. He pressed the broken wood against the ground and stood tall, swaying but unbroken. "You will not take her," he said hoarsely. "Not while I'm alive." The gang leader growled, his pride wounded, but when he saw the fire in the human's eyes, he hesitated. This was no weak traitor. This was a man willing to die without fear. The others shifted nervously, unsure if they wanted to continue. The leader spat blood and barked orders, but his men looked at one another with doubt. Fighting a man like this was dangerous. For what? A starving girl? Slowly, step by step, they began to retreat. The leader cursed them, but without his men, even he could not stand against the human. With one last glare, he growled, "This isn't over," and vanished into the shadows. His men followed, leaving the firelight behind. The human dropped to his knees, blood dripping onto the dirt. His breaths came heavy and ragged, but he was still alive. The girl rushed to his side, her hands shaking as she tried to press against his wounds. "Why?" she cried. "Why would you fight for me? I'm no one. I'm nothing." His weak hand rose and touched her head gently. "Because you deserve more than nothing," he whispered. "Because no one should ever feel they don't matter." Her tears fell on his wounds as she pressed harder to stop the bleeding. She shook her head fiercely. "No one has ever fought for me. No one, until you." She looked at the broken cake, still sitting on the stone, untouched except for the small piece she had eaten. The candles were gone, the moment shattered, but the memory of it still glowed inside her. The gang had tried to steal her birthday, but the human had refused. He had given her something even greater, a reason to believe she was worth protecting. The night dragged on as she sat beside him, whispering to keep him awake, refusing to let him close his eyes. The fire burned low, and the ruined colony was silent again, but the silence felt different now. She was no longer just an abandoned child. She was someone who had been fought for, someone who mattered. And in her heart, she promised that no matter what came next, she would never let the human sacrifice be wasted. He had given her a birthday, and she would carry it like a light through the darkest nights. The first light of dawn crept slowly over the ruins, painting the broken walls with pale gold. The human was still on the ground, his body weak from blood loss, his breaths uneven. The girl sat beside him the whole night, her small hands pressed against his wounds, refusing to move even when her arms ached. She whispered to him again and again, begging him not to leave her. She had never prayed before, but that night she prayed to every star, every god she could think of, that he would survive. When his eyes fluttered open and met hers, she let out a sob of relief. He tried to sit up, but pain shot through him, and he almost fell back. She steadied him quickly, her thin arms holding on as tightly as she could. "Don't move too much," she whispered, tears still wet on her cheeks. "You'll get worse." He gave a faint smile despite the pain. "I've been through worse," he said, though his voice was hoarse and weak. She shook her head, pressing her forehead to his chest. "You shouldn't have done it. You almost died because of me." His hand lifted slowly, brushing through her tangled hair. "I told you," he whispered. "You're worth it." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the crackling of the dying fire. Then the girl spoke again, her voice trembling. "No one ever stayed. No one ever fought for me. But you did. Why?" The human closed his eyes, gathering his strength before answering. "Because I saw a child who deserved more than this broken world gave her. Because I couldn't walk away from you, not when I knew you had never even been given one day to feel special." His words sank into her heart like sunlight through clouds. She pressed her face against his side, sobbing quietly, not from sadness this time, but from something new, hope. The colony slowly woke around them, but the fire from the night before had spread more than smoke and ashes. Rumors traveled quickly. People whispered of a human who had stood against the gang, who had fought with his bare hands to protect a worthless girl. At first, they laughed, mocking him as a fool. But as the story spread, their voices grew quieter. Some began to wonder, why would a man risk his life for an abandoned child? Was she truly worthless if someone was willing to bleed for her? Seeds of doubt were planted in the minds of those who had once only sneered. The girl noticed the way people looked at them when she went to fetch water. Their eyes were different now, not softer, but less certain. She walked taller that morning, still clutching her tin cup, but now she felt it had meaning. She was no longer invisible. Someone had proven she mattered. That truth gave her a strength she never thought she had. She hurried back to the fire, where the human was trying to stand despite his injuries. She scolded him, half angry, half worried, and forced him to sit back down. He laughed weakly, saying, "You sound like someone who cares." She looked at him fiercely through her tears. "I do," she said. "I don't want to lose you." He touched her hand, his grip weak but steady. "You won't," he promised. "I'll heal, and when I do, I'll keep my word. You'll have a birthday every year. No one will ever take that from you again." Her eyes widened at his words, and she shook her head as more tears fell. "Even after last night? Even after they almost killed you?" He nodded firmly. "Especially after last night. They wanted to steal your hope. I won't let them win. You'll always have your day." The girl leaned against him, her small hand gripping his tightly. She closed her eyes and let herself believe him. For the first time in her life, she imagined a future. She imagined more candles, more laughter, more nights where she wouldn't be cold or alone. The thought filled her chest with warmth stronger than any fire. She whispered, "Then I'll wait for it. Every year, I'll wait." As the sun rose higher, the gang did not return. Word spread that their leader had been shamed, beaten by a man who refused to break. He had lost face, and his men no longer followed him with the same fear. The danger was not gone, but it had weakened. The human and the girl could breathe, at least for now. The human leaned back, closing his eyes, the weight of exhaustion heavy on him. The girl stayed beside him, guarding him as he had guarded her. When strangers passed, she lifted her chin, no longer hiding. Her voice carried strength when she said, "He's mine. He fought for me." No one dared laugh at her that day. When night fell again, the fire burned brighter. The girl took the last piece of cake and placed it carefully in front of him. "It's your turn," she said shyly. He looked at her in surprise. She smiled through her tired eyes. "It's not just my birthday, it's yours too, because you gave me life again." He laughed softly, though his side hurt, and broke the piece in half. He gave her one half and kept the other. "Then we share it," he said. Together they ate, the sweetness lingering longer than it should have, as if the memory itself made it taste better. That night, as she curled close to him by the fire, the girl whispered words she had never dared to speak before. "I don't feel abandoned anymore. I feel found." The human closed his eyes, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You are found," he murmured, "and as long as I'm alive, you will never be alone again." The ruins still surrounded them. Danger still lurked in the shadows. But the girl no longer felt empty. Her heart carried a light that no gang could steal, a light born from a birthday candle and a man who refused to let her be forgotten. For the first time in her life, she believed she had a future. And beside the human who had fought for her, that future felt bright.